Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. Thank you so very much for joining me this evening, wherever you are in the world. And I do hope you're doing exceedingly well and that you've had a really fabulous day and are about to settle down and get cozy and comfortable to a really fabulous story, because I've got a really great story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. My name is Mark, and my Bigfoot encounter happened almost 10 years ago in 2010. The story begins when my mother was talking to her stepsister on the phone. I was 18 at the time, and her stepsister called Tina told her that the family was going abroad for a 4-week vacation to England, Ireland and Scotland. They were so very excited, but didn't want to board their very large dogs and their single cat while they were away. But the last time they'd hired a sitter to look after their animals, he had let them down atrociously, and they had returned home early from the vacation. I gather he'd been using drugs and was high as a kite most of the time, and had done a very poor job in taking care of their animals. I rarely checked all his background stuff, said Tina, and no one had a bad thing to say about the young man. And look how that turned out. I don't know if I can put my trust in another sitter. I really don't know what I'm going to do. My mother suddenly had a splendid idea. Mark's available for 4 weeks, she said. He'll take care of your animals. Besides, I'm sure a little fresh country air would do him the world of good. Mark, cried my Aunt Tina in delight. Oh, that would be absolutely fabulous. But do you think he'd be up to it? It's pretty remote out here. The nearest town is only an hour's drive away. For a young man, that could be tediously dull. Not for Mark, said my mother. He loves the great outdoors and enjoys his own company. So it was all arranged. I was to go and stay at my step-aunt's house, and believe it or not, I was actually rather excited. I loved life in New York, but it really lacked the space and the openness of the countryside, so I was really looking forward to a change of scene. I'd never been to my step-aunt's house before, so I had no idea what to expect. I had been instructed that all the keys for the house were under a large blue flower pot in the entrance to the property. I found myself driving down this remote dirt back road that looked like it had once been a logger's road. Both sides of the road were lined with large oak trees that swept back into the surrounding valley for miles, forming seemingly vast areas of natural forest. I finally found the shabby-looking pole gate that led up to another dirt road to a very large wooden cabin. The cabin was a Scandinavian-style full log home with a 10-foot-high log wall. It was really quite spacious and very pretty, which surprised me, because I'd never imagined Aunt Tina to have much style, but this log home was utterly enchanting. I could hear excited barking as I opened the front door and was greeted by 2 giant Irish wolfhounds and 3 very affectionate cats. I thought she only had 1, but it appeared to be 3, and they were very friendly to me. Inside the cabin was even more luxurious than the outside. The place was tidy, spacious and clearly designed for comfort, but in a very stylish way, which meant there was very comfortable sofas strewn around the house that were so pleasing to the body as any bed would be. I could see Aunt Tina had prepared the fireplaces for me and kept the fridge and freezers stuffed and stocked with food and ready-prepared meals that she had labelled for me fastidiously. This really was going to be more like a holiday retreat than a chore, I thought excitedly. I lit the fire as it was starting to get quite chilly outside. I fed the dogs and cats and sat down to watch some television. Before I knew it, I'd fallen fast asleep. I was soon to learn that these sofas were almost more comfortable than a bed. I woke up to 2 Irish wolfhounds growling at the front door in such a way that I began to wonder that if someone was out there. I turned off the TV and listened, but I heard nothing. Then I realised there definitely was someone outside, because I could suddenly hear a crunching of heavy footsteps on the gravel. I suddenly felt quite anxious and grabbed the firearm that was hanging on the rack close to the door. Who would be out here at this time of the night? Aunt Tina had not told me of any potential visitors, so I was not expecting anyone. Suddenly I heard a very loud slapping sound on the side of the cabin, almost as if someone was deliberately hitting the wooden beams of the cabin with a very large heavy pole. The dogs went ballistic, and their barks were deafening, and the cats all scrambled under the furniture, hiding away in terror. If this was how the animals were behaving, the disturbances on this night were unusual for them. Should I be worried, I wondered? Should I call the police or a neighbour? or should I just wait and see if everything calmed down? And I'm glad to say that it actually did. The next few days that followed were incredibly beautiful, and the nights that followed were peaceful and serene, and I was beginning to forget about the intruder on my first night. But then the same disturbances began all over again, but this time the noises were thunderously loud, as whatever it was relentlessly banging the house like a heavy drum, as if it was trying to get my attention. I stumbled out the front door, clutching the rifle very tightly with both the two wolfhounds running behind me. They were looking up at the cabin and barking hysterically. I could smell this foul skunk-like odour in the air, and as I looked up at the cabin roof, I saw the silhouette of the most monstrous bipedal creature looking directly down at me. Bear in mind I'm a New Yorker, and I'm obliviously unaware of cryptid-like creatures like Bigfoot. Of course I have heard about those things before, but the notion of such a creature actually existing was preposterous in my mind's eye. I actually believed people who believed in such things were naive and gullible. As I gazed up at the rooftop, I knew I was facing a very dangerous, colossal creature, and whatever it was, I had no idea. I just stared up at it in stupefied silence, hardly daring to believe what I was actually seeing. This thing was colossal, much bigger and more frightening than a grizzly, and its body was covered with dark, short hair. What I noticed about this creature was the weird cone-shaped head that flowed down seamlessly to a huge pair of shoulders, bypassing any need for a neck. The upper torso of this thing reminded me of the Incredible Hulk. It was so monstrously big that it made the hips and legs look thin by comparison, yet in reality every appendage of this gargantuan beast was monstrously big. I'm not good at estimating weights and heights as a general rule. However, I think I can safely say this thing weighed 1,000 pounds and was at least 10 foot tall. The creature stared at me with a very large, primate-looking face, with a very prominent brow ridge, flat nose and a thin mouth, but it was those eyes, so deep-set and brown, but had a very definite red eye shine that put the fear of God into every cell of my body. The eyes were as round as saucers, and truly they glowed in a red traffic-light colour. It felt like they penetrated me like a red laser light. I watched the creature pounding the cabin with the large timber pole he was carrying in his long arms. It was like he wanted me to see what he was actually doing. What on earth was he trying to do, I wondered? Why was he beating the cabin like this? If he was trying to scare me, it was working because I was terrified. I was a city boy, and stuff like this I knew nothing about. It was all beyond me. I aimed the rifle at the creature, not knowing what else to do, and when he saw me do this, he let out the most awful, frightful scream, and it sounded almost feminine, almost like a female being murdered. It was so terrifying that even the dogs yelped in terror and scuttled back into the cabin, looking for somewhere to hide. I watched the creature jumping off the side of the house, about a 14-foot drop, I kid you not, and the creature landed on his feet that appeared to be very padded, with the agility of a domestic cat. And then he literally tottered away on his padded feet across the ground with the speed and grace of a cheetah, and then he was gone from my sight. I stood there for a long moment in total silence and absolute awe, trying to mentally comprehend and make sense of everything that had just transpired, and then I went back indoors and bolted every single door and window, and I allowed the dogs to pee on newspaper because I was not coming out of that cabin until the morning. The next day I examined the area outside where the creature had scuttled away, and there was an area beyond the gravel where the ground was actually wet, and I discovered 3 very distinct footprints that measured at least 17 inches in the ground. Now, believe me, that's big. Suddenly I noticed a young woman coming up the drive. In truth, I was relieved to see someone human after everything that had occurred the previous night. She had brown hair tied back in a ponytail and was wearing jeans, boots and a white blouse. "Hello," she said, reaching for my hand. "My name is Sue. I'm your closest neighbour. Tina told me you were looking after the animals while she's away. I know this is going to sound strange, but I wondered if you've been experiencing any strange activity, such as banging sounds at night on your cabin." "How do you know about that?" I asked. "Because something weird's been going on over the last 3 days. 3 of the neighbours have been experiencing these angry drumming sounds on their houses. I just wondered if you got to see anything. Everyone was too afraid to go outside their houses to see what was going on, but something was on their roofs, banging away very violently. I saw it, I said to Sue, and I proceeded to tell her about what had happened and how I had seen this massive creature on my roof hitting the cabin like a drum. You do know what you saw, said Sue. I believe you saw a Bigfoot. But are those things actually real, I asked. You tell me, she said. You're the one that actually saw it. What does he want, I asked. Good question, said Sue. Why, after all these years, without ever seeing sight or sound of these things, is this creature very suddenly trying to scare us all half to death, and not just you, all 3 of the neighbours? Have you ever seen one, I asked. No, never, but I have heard their whoops and owl calls, so I know they're out there. People go looking for these things, you know, but they tend to be so elusive and private. There are occasional sightings, but some people believe they're bogus or misidentified. And you, I asked, do you believe these sightings are bogus? If I did then, I don't now. I know there's a huge creature on our roof last night, banging away, and you got to see a Bigfoot, so it's clearly what's going on. A Bigfoot has been terrorising not only you, but 3 of the other neighbours too. Where do you think they actually live, I asked. Look around you, laughed Sue. There are forests absolutely everywhere, abundant wildlife, loads of water sources. What is there not to like for a Bigfoot here? They could live anywhere around here, especially in those forests. Has there been any changes around here recently, I asked suddenly. I have heard that animals don't like sudden change. Oh my word, gasped Sue. You could be onto something there. All this commotion started after my dad started logging in that forest over there, she said, pointing in a southerly direction. It could be their habitat. I suggest maybe it's a spot where they live and they're expressing their anger. Excuse me, said Sue. I've just had an idea. I'm going to phone the logging team and find out if they've been experiencing any abuse from this creature. She dialed a number on her mobile phone, and I watched her pacing up and down the drive very nervously. But where did they go, I heard her say. When did this happen? What did you say? Thanks, Rolf. Speak to you later. Sue looked at me, and her face went as white as a sheet. The loggers have all bailed, she said. They're simply refusing to work, because they've been terrified. Something's been watching them and has been throwing big boulders at them while they've been logging. They've been hearing growling and roaring sounds in the forest and seen the shadow of a giant-like creature staring at them through the trees, and he's hostile, aggressive and relentless in his actions. And apparently the forest stinks because of this thing. It must be the Bigfoot I saw, I said. He was colossal. Well, we're all in danger if something's not done about this. I'll speak to my dad. The next day I learnt from Sue that they were no longer going to log that particular area, and her father had called a halt to the activity and the logging because he didn't want this creature to harm anyone, and he didn't want to go after the thing either with all guns blazing. We need to leave those things well alone, he'd said. The moment the logging stopped, so did the banging on all our homes, and everything went back to normal, and I was able to enjoy the rest of my stay at my aunt's cabin. I did go with Sue to see the woods where the loggers experienced the Bigfoot activity, and they were beautiful and teeming with wildlife, and there was a sparkling spring running through the whole area. While we were there, the forest went incredibly quiet, and we did sense eyes on us, so we both left the place as fast as we could, and have never been back. I returned to New York and continued my life, but something in me has changed dramatically. I used to be so set in my opinions about things, and reluctant to consider other possibilities, but now I'm much more open to things. I also believe it's made me a much nicer person, more sensitive to the feelings of others, and I like myself more these days. What some people might pooh-pooh as impossible, I will stop and consider, because who knows, it could and it just might be true. I like the fact that I don't have to close the door on an idea because of a limited mindset and a closed belief system. I know that if Bigfoot is out there, then there may be other cryptid creatures like him too. It's got me wondering about legends of old when strange creatures were described and accounted for in the past. Could they be real too? Anything is possible to me now, and for me the world has become a much more exciting and mysterious place. Well, I want to thank you for that incredible story. Wow, that's amazing. Until next time, goodbye and good night.